All right, everyone, welcome to another No Gear Required podcast. As always, I have Jay Zabalos with me, Mike Zabalos, the man behind the cameras, make everything possible for us. Today I have an old friend. I think I met Chris Haueter. I met him in 1991. He was already doing jiu-jitsu with my brother Higan. And I could not say much because my English was not there. But I think it's bringing back so many great memories. Chris Haueter, well, welcome to our podcast, man.
Thank you guys for having me on. I love podcasts.
That's not old school. It's a continuous school.
It's continuous.
Not old. It's just a continuous school. Man, it's been a long journey, man.
I remember I was a new purple belt in 1991. And I remember before you came, Higan saying in his then broken English, my brother JeanJacques, he's going to come. And this guy, man, so amazing. Wait till you see his bar. And it's true.
Man, there was... I'm going to start from the time that I met Chris, and even before, because I don't know if a lot of people know, we had our second school moving from one house, the garage, to the second house was actually his house.
Yep.
His parents' house.
The back garage. Yep.
That's where we had the school for quite some time, a few years there. And I remember I arrived, they have like a balcony on the back of the house, and they made a frame and they put a plastic. That was incredible time. But I didn't know until some time that I was living in U.S. I arrived in '92. That was his house, and I think it was like a great memory. But I want to go back, Chris, and ask you, when was your first encounter with jiu-jitsu?
Okay, so let's my origin story, right? Here is the origin story. And in a lot of ways, I would say it's, we all have kind of the same origin story. And then we have our own unique things about it. Out of all of the athletics, the people who are attracted to the combat sports, as opposed to the non-sport martial arts, like Kung Fu and all this stuff, is a type of a personality that kind of straddles the line between athletics and arts. And not that other athletics like the NBA, tennis, basketball.
It's like almost like a different environment. All have great addition to
yes.
life.
And they're arts in and of themselves. But the people that are attracted to the combat sports are a whole other breed. And I was perhaps one of the more extreme versions of that breed. In other words, like...
Because you were a former U.S. Marine.
I was a Marine.
And I think that has, in a way, that edge as a background that needs something that keep you on the edge.
Absolutely. And but I think it even goes back to childhood. So I was a guy who had a really bad stutter, to a point where there's a couple years where I was almost mute. I could barely speak. Now at the time, it sucked, of course.
I would say this, from the time I met you and now, it's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
I don't see anything.
Yeah.
And it started there at all.
And I give a lot of that to with jiu-jitsu. But in that time, the one thing, the one skill I acquired is I became a great observer. And I knew how to listen because I couldn't fucking talk. And I grew up in a kind of, one could say, a normal working class 70s upbringing, which was kind of a weird time. And those of you who are older out there will remember the weirdness of the 70s.
I wasn't born that time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I often say I was a child of the 60s, grew up in the 70s, became of age in the 80s, and lost my cool in the 90s.
It's a pretty good journey.
Right?
And I guess Jiu-Jitsu fits in perfectly.
Absolutely. And so as a kid that stuttered a lot, had a big ego, was small for my age, I got in a lot of fights. A lot of fights because I couldn't but turn down a fight. I didn't want to be called a coward, right? I relate a lot to the honor culture of Brazil, and then so I did classical Japanese karate, and I would learn this stuff, and it was kind of like it was either expressly said or implied that once you get to the next level, then it will work. And karate wasn't working really well in my, whether it was just sparring with my friends at the park after school or a real fight, like I always retreated to the primal instinct of rushing in and grabbing. So by the time high school rolled around, wrestling was a natural fit. I'm a grabber. And I was okay at wrestling. High school was kind of wild years. I got ran over by a car my senior year. That's a whole long story. It ran right over my stomach. My head hit the engine. I remember oil pouring out all over me, which was actually blood that I thought was oil from the car. It's a long fucking story, but I got a lot of wild stories of youth where I missed.
I guess your pace was on the pace to find something that makes you in a normal lifestyle, which I can see Jiu-Jitsu ahead in your life regardless.
Yes.
But continue. I'm kind of I didn't know about those facts.
Okay.
I'm learning. I'm learning too that.
So wrestling I loved in high school, and I quickly perfected the skill of shooting in, bringing a guy down, holding him in a headlock, and punching him in the face. And I'm not saying I fought all the time. I'm not proud that I fought a lot, but I drank a lot. I couldn't turn down fights, and you know, young males fight. That's what we do.
We all have those phases in our life. Then later on in life, we learned that was a learning process that somehow I have to go through.
Yes.
And you did survive, and
yes,
look at you today here, sir.
So then during the period where I right after high school, I went in the Marine Corps Reserves. This will be a whole other story down the other line. But not long after that, I realized that my area of main weakness was striking. So I got heavily into Muay Thai and boxing. And I had one pro Muay Thai fight, which I won, but it hurt like fucking hell. And I remember I sat down between rounds 2 and 3 and realized that I had broken my shin. It hurt so fucking bad. And I outhanded the guy because I had a fast jab. That was the one thing I got from a classical karate. Because the stance is so bad, right? You have to be fast. Because if you're down here in a punch, anyone can read it, right? And I did learn the beauty of you don't wind your shot up and fire, you fire the shot out, right? And so, like, I learned a lot, but I also learned that I loved boxing, but boxing does not love me back. And I was at the time I was down in a Santos advanced class, but doing calling and stuff, which I liked, but as a guy who fought, wrestled, boxed, did Muay Thai, it wasn't real enough. So I decided that my grappling skills needed work, and I would go join the college wrestling team. And when I showed up, Mitz Yamashita, who's now passed away, was running the Aikido club. And I knew him, and he was showing guys escapes out of mounts. And I'm like looking at this, and I'm like, that won't work against me, Mitz. And he goes, why don't you try it? And of course, you know that they would mount me, and I'd extend an arm, turn over. I got arm locked a couple times, choke, and it was rough. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know Aikido had a whole grappling thing. I want to learn Aikido. And he goes, this isn't Aikido. This is a jiu-jitsu and a special kind. And he wrote down Horion's number. And I immediately went home and called it. This was probably the fall of '88. And Horion answered, and within a week, that's how I started.
Then from that point on, and if, I guess not Jiu-Jitsu fits for you, you felt also that you fit in for Jiu-Jitsu. And how long after that, I don't know if my brother Higan was already there.
He was there. There's a lot of things that I think all of us humans, if we're smart, we don't necessarily say in camera and on a public.
Yes.
But I could sense at the time there was tensions already between Horion, Higan, and Hoyce and Hickson. And when I met Higan, he was Higan Gracie. And my first 5 privates were with Hoyce. And I even hung around Hoyce a bit, you know, out in town. And then one time Hoyce wasn't around, or we had to reschedule, and I got Hickson. And then one time I got Higan. And I really was trying to arrange my privates with Hickson and Higan at that time. And Horion had it structured where, because the group class was kind of the reward after you were approved of by your instructor. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to get in the group class because I wanted to spar. And I'll always remember my first private with Hickson, I learned the real headlock escape. That
the one you used to hold everyone.
Right, not my wrestling version of holding it and how we escaped athletically and explosively. And
you learned the technique.
Yes, and I learned about using the shoulder. And I remember Hickson explaining that this is a more weight class oriented thing. You're lightweight. I don't want to be holding a heavyweight in the lock. And he'd say, hold me. Yes. And then he'd turn me, and now he's on top. And I'm like, oh yeah, that is. And my first Higan private, I remember I asked him, I go, he goes, okay, what do you want to learn? One of the things I really liked right off the bat about Higan is I went in there, and I was probably the 3rd one in a row where Higan only was getting paid like $5 a private. And he goes, oh, my friend, I'm Higan Machado, or Higan Gracie, because then he's Higan Gracie. Can you give me a minute, man? I just had like 3 in a row, and I saw humility. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool, because, I mean, from the martial arts world of that time, the pre-internet world, the occasional VHS running around of a real Brazilian Vale Tudo fight and all that was, I mean, there was a lot of mystique about you black belts from Brazil and the Gracie family, a lot of fear and the challenge and all that, right? And Higan was very humble, and I thought, I'm going to ask him. I go, you know that move where you cut the guy's head? Like, oh, the triangle. Okay, I'll show you the triangle. And it's like I felt like I was learning the secrets already, right? And then let's just fast forward a long ways away. Higan was starting to teach on his own out of his garage at the same time where he was at Horion's. And Hickson was then starting to have a split from Horion. And I was kind of torn.
Check that out.
I was torn where to go.
He goes to train. He has the options of Hoist, Gracie, Hickson, Gracie, Haueter, Gracie, and Higgin. Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of hard choice.
And it was $20 a private.
Hicks is okay. And tomorrow go Hoist is okay. And yeah, Higgin next time. Then Horion. Like it was almost everyone's dream. To have the opportunity.
At $20 a private.
$20 a class.
$20. $20 a private. Yeah.
I remember that time.
Yeah, it was unreal.
A lot of classes taught by $20, which I believe back those days was, I think, was reasonable. Was a way also.
I think it was still cheap
for us to introduce the art, because there was a lot of people like, I don't want to do this. We remember going to some schools, showing jiu-jitsu to the school owners, and they figured out they could not survive, and instead of them bringing people in, they said, I don't want to ever see you guys again. I don't want students to see that.
But you're right, Chris. I remember because I came up from a traditional background.
Yeah.
I'd go to different schools, and then I used to compete like in point fighting, and there was a lot of ego, a lot of arrogance, and you didn't really. A lot of the black belts made themselves unapproachable.
Very unapproachable, yes.
And I went to a tournament after I signed up here. I went to a tournament like my first weekend just to watch, and I saw a super fight. I don't remember the guy's name. He was a Brazilian, and he fought David Meyer. And first time I saw black belts fighting live, and then I went to get something to eat. I'm sitting there, and then that black belt walks up and sits right next to me. And I was like, "Oh, should I say something?" He's probably, why not? So I told him, I said, "That was beautiful, your jiu-jitsu," and he very broken English, but put his arm on my shoulder, "Thank you, my friend," shook my hand, and I had the same response. I'm like, wow, not only is he approachable and does he have humility, but his skill set would allow him to be the opposite of that.
Yes.
It's not, and I think that's the thing about jiu-jitsu that I've always loved is like
it does bring people together.
It does. Yeah. And in that early phase, in that it's like there was a while back, not so much anymore, but maybe 10, 15 years back, a lot of guys, especially Americans and Europeans, were kind of scoffing at the Gracie challenge, thinking it was uncool and stuff. But you got to understand the culture then. When I began this, the world thought that movies were reality, much more so.
We today can say Jiu-Jitsu brought reality
into the movies too. And
people realize, like, man, I can't fight 10 guys at once. That's not going to work.
It won't work. Yeah.
But I think there was the fact that created a little, I guess, misunderstanding and jealousy from a lot of people back those days. Were like, well, that's not good for my business. And we're not about business. We're about reality. That's how we learn, and that's how we're going to pass on until today.
Well, just like here's a story, and I'm sure you have a bunch of these because you're JeanJacquesMachado. But when I'm a new purple belt, and circumstances of life, military and other stuff, it's 1992, and I find myself in the panhandle of Pensacola, Florida. And I'm the highest ranking guy in the entire area, perhaps the entire state at that time. And with jiu-jitsu, you guys, Gracie's, Machados, there was only jiu-jitsu in LA, Hawaii, NorCal.
That's it.
That was it. Carly was up north.
Carly was in San Francisco.
Yes.
Helson was in Hawaii.
Helson in Hawaii.
And, right here in LA, Carson City was Oregon.
Yep.
And then later, as we went Redondo Beach.
Yes, you guys
we split.
Redondo.
We went up to
Hickson up in
Santa Monica.
Yep. And that was it. And it was like UFC 1 had happened, I think, at that time. UFC 1 happened in 91?
No, it was
93.
it
wait, it hadn't happened yet. I'm a purple.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I remember I went to the garage at Higa before UFC.
That's right.
You already have a lot of people training.
UFC hadn't
You
happened.
guys-
I brought a lot of guys.
You guys brought a lot of
Yes.
people because you guys said, hey, you went to high school, said, hey, you guys gotta. And we have a lot of
We got our
wrestlers,
wrestlers,
a lot
our
of kids come in.
boxers, all the guys who like to fight.
We
Yeah.
have once I remember I was visiting my brothers and was in Avenue B at that time. On Saturday was the biggest class. I think in the garage you can barely fit 2 cars. So
Yeah.
you have easily 30 plus people.
Yep.
Then we have the drive on the back, the alley. Then
Yes,
people-
with the big hill. Yeah.
And what happened was we did not know all the neighbors on the street, and somebody called the police.
Yeah.
And they complained, said, hey, something's going on in the house because you have every Saturday 30 cars, 40 cars on the street.
Yeah.
And we have a bunch of these guys
Yeah,
on the alley
yeah,
there.
yeah.
The police came in. You see the cops. The garage is kind of not like open all the way. You see the cops looking down.
What are these guys doing?
What the heck's going on here?
Is this a
Then-
fight club?
Then he goes like, what are you guys doing? Then we explain the cops, it's jiu-jitsu, and like, they became our students.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they just told us, look, make sure you guys Saturday spread out in the neighborhood. Don't park here on the same street.
Yep,
But here I am, we have our first officers, the students,
yep.
in the early 90s.
It was early 90s.
And you were already there, purple belt.
I was a purple belt. Yeah, I was
Higa told me you and Bob Bass,
me, Bob Bass, Joey Bass,
Brian, remember I had a skinny Brian, he was a blue belt. I
Yep.
don't know his name. I mean, you guys are his best student, you and Bob Bass particularly. You guys are the top guys. And he was saying, hey man, I gotta wrestle those 2 guys. They're my top guys. Yeah, all right, Higa, let's do it.
But okay, I got to tell you this. So it's before UFC. I'm a purple belt, and I'm addicted to jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, I need it. I crave it. It's like crack. I have to have it at least once every other day, or I'm going nuts. And I go over to the judo club on the Navy base, and you know, I would do the judo class, and I couldn't wait till the very end so I could get to roll with the guys, and I could beat then all the black belts, right? And it would drive them nuts, but they would never ask me how. And it was the old school days where if no one asks you, you don't tell them, right? This is my weapon. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. And the local Jeet Kune Do Kali Club, there was a local Aikido club at the college, and I would go to all the clubs, and after a while I would recruit 1 or 2 out of each of them, and I had my own class. And this was, yeah, pre-UFC, but the height of the awareness in the martial arts community of the Gracie Challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And we had at a college campus in this mat room where I had a small class, a whiteboard. And I wrote on there, you know, the jiu-jitsu class, Wednesday afternoons, 4 p.m., I don't remember. And it had like the kung fu class, a flyer, the karate class and all that. And one day, someone crossed it out and wrote, don't train in a style that has belts, pajamas, and all this stuff. And it was an insult, and I'd feel my blood rise. Like, oh, this is a fucking insult. Sure enough, about a week afterwards, these guys came, and it was the Kung Fu Club guys, and they had a guy my weight, and he's doing all his stretches and all this. I'm like, fuck, I got to do a challenge with no black belts here to back me up. It was fucking scary. And I learned, I remembered Horion, you know, how he explained before you do the fight, you discuss what rules are involved. And, well, we have eye gouging and groin grabs. And then he wanted the eye gouging and the groin. He's like, you know, that's my style and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, how about round 1? We have none just in case, because I don't want to get my eye poked. You don't. And he finally agreed, okay, round 1, no eye gouge or groin grab. And of course, he gets in his kung fu stance, and I entered. I take him down, and I learned this from Hegan when I was a blue belt, because in this other match, a guy and I, it was a challenge fight, and I would bring him on the ground, and I was being nice. I would gently choke him out, or I would mount him and but turn him over and then
Choke him.
choke him or armbar. And Higgins like, well, this after every one. And he goes, but come here. And he goes, but this guy, he will not remember. He thinks it's a fluke. He thinks you get lucky. If you don't cause pain or control, he thinks it's lucky. And so this time, don't choke him. Hold him down and just start hitting him in the face. And I felt kind of bad about it, but as soon as I started hitting him, he's like, okay, I tap, right? And it's like, okay. And then I learned that, so then later on, when I'm alone, it's no black belts around me, I like say, okay, no eye gouge, but grab. I mount him, and I'm like, you can't move, and he tries to grab my groin, and I just started fucking bitch slapping him, right? And then he turned, and I choked him, and I jumped up, and I go, let's go, one more. Now we allow everything. And he goes, nope, I had enough, right? It was kind of fun in those early days, right?
And I think in a way, a lot of people sometimes see that and they think it was something violence. Jiu-Jitsu had to create their own path of their existence.
Yes.
Since little early days in Brazil, all the fights that happened on the street, none of the fight was pursued by any member of the family. I remember every altercation that we ended up being involved was to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
But was for us a point to prove how efficient
Yes.
the training that we
Yes.
do. We never trained to fight on the streets. We trained just to protect ourselves. But you have like ages that in the 70s and the 80s, and a lot of countries they have a different culture and a lot of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
And in our days was each altercation that happened was one step forward to establish Jiu-Jitsu even further.
Yes, yes.
Because imagine in all those altercations, if somebody loses the battle,
Mm-hmm.
we might not be here today talking.
That's right.
You know what I mean? What people don't realize is the amount of pressure in a great way that everyone that's from the family that stepped in the ring or had any fight is not about, it's a win-win.
Right.
There's no losing crossing anyone's mind.
You guys
confidence
had
that we
so
have-
much pressure. So much pressure.
There we go. And
It was way like in Brazil.
but we know if
Yeah,
we want
it was-
Jiu-Jitsu to stay alive, we have to go through this.
Yeah. And I remember, I don't know whether I think it was Hickson very early on, he said, because I think I asked him about strikes, and he said, you want to learn a jiu-jitsu solution to a striking problem, not how to wrestle and hit. And that really stuck. Whereas later on, as a newer black belt, I remember, I would often, when my guys, were grappling, maybe they're grabbing a leg here and they're holding it here, I'd slap them in the face just to remind them, not only are you unaware of my hands, but you can't hit back, but I can hit you as the black belt, because you have to find a jiu-jitsu solution, but to me hitting you, not a hit me back. And it seemed like at the time when I was a lower belt, it's like, oh, that's not fair. Only the black belt, he gets to punch me and I can't punch him. But really, that's how you learn this art, because otherwise we would leave the art, just like almost like the new modern game became so detached from the strike.
We understand that when you hit, I grapple.
Yeah.
When you grapple, hit.
Yes. And
You
now
understand there's no exchange. I'm not doing you punch and punch. No. Punch and grapple.
Yes.
Oh, you want to grapple me? Now I'm going to hit you.
Now I'm going to hit you.
understand?
Yeah.
That's the philosophy, the idea behind in our early days in training.
I liked that
For
early.
safety.
For safety. Yes.
Safety.
And
in all this process of having classes and learning from the roots, the beginning of Jiu-Jitsu, if you have to put in a scale today, how much difference was back in those days in the garage learning the foundation, the basics that we're still carrying that until today, and the jiu-jitsu that is out there today. If you can see in a scale,
Yeah.
it's not about better or worse.
It's just changed. It's just changed. It's like, remember in the old days, we would all show up, some guys a bit late, some guys early, and then at a point, a black belt would start of the class. And then at any time, you're like, okay, guys, everybody stop against the wall. We'd have Ironmans, challenge fights. You know, like, okay, Chris, lie down, we'll grab your belt with one hand, you pass as guard. And then it would be like a lot of, and it was just kind of structured. It always felt just much more intense back then. Not like, it was friendly, but it was
more realistic.
more realistic. And it was like, and a lot of times, like in the waning days when I at the old hole in the wall school in Redondo, where I always say, like, I remember the final months where all the Machados were all on the mat, all together. And it was when I was going through brown belt but through early black belt. And just watching how you guys would train and stuff. And I think that was when you were getting ready for Abu Dhabi, too, at that point.
Yeah, 99.
Or no, was that? Yes, 99, yeah.
I did a fight in, I think I fought Nakai, I'm not sure which year, 95, 96.
Yeah.
Then, but yeah, we always train in a way that when we learn in Brazil, in a different aspect is, Jiu-Jitsu was already there from prior generations. There was no need for any kind of introduction. And evidently, when people come in, you see a lot of people with different backgrounds. We're not sure if they're ready to do Jiu-Jitsu for real.
Yeah.
That's why in the beginning it was a very slow and kind step, showing very basic techniques to make people familiar with the ground.
Yes.
No one had any clue.
No one had
what
any
to
clue
do on the ground.
Yeah.
I remember maybe for the whole year, escape from the mount, pass the guard, control from the mount, arm lock, arm bar, somebody turn it back choke. That was the class. And I remember for the whole year, everyone that comes in, and I have a lot of guys, big, small, all different backgrounds. Sir, line up back, I'm gonna mount on you. If you escape from the mount, your first 30 days will be free. They look at you like, what? That's it? If I escape, it's free? They're there for 5 minutes, they couldn't get out. They're like, okay, I'd rather pay. I don't want to try to escape anymore. And their point was they had no idea of what to do at all.
No, they didn't. And so many back then, and still I think, but jiu-jitsu is something that you have to feel.
Oh, it's all about feeling.
You can't
it's not what you see.
It's not what you see.
It's what you feel. That's why sometimes from outside, hey, turn around. And it's like, yeah, from outside, you can see it turn around. But there, you don't know if this guy's sitting on your hip.
Yeah.
You can't move.
Yeah. And
that's why it's not what you see. It's very tricky. People sometimes see something, that's not actually what's happening.
Yeah. You have no idea. No idea. Even boxing
definitely.
But that element
is a very different.
But people can't. It's when you're watching it, it's one thing, but when you're here, it's a whole other world.
How many times, like you said yourself, no, I don't think that works for me.
Yeah.
Until you go there, it's like, oh, when do I sign?
Yeah. And
is that in those early days in the garage any stories or fun stories that happened? Because I'm sure the beginners, I think, was at the same time more intense, but at the same time more relaxed. People were very friendly. Too.
Yes. And
any stories and during the training, a new visitor or a new student?
I remember watching. What was his name? He was in UFC 1, 2, and 3. Ken Shamrock.
Yes.
Came, and I watched Hegan play with him like a baby, and then kick him out. That was pretty intense. I mean.
That was in the little school in Redondo Beach.
Yeah. And
I remember was Ken Shamrock and Funaki.
Yeah.
I wrestled Funaki and John. We wrestled Funaki, and
Yes.
It was a very strange time in a way because out of nowhere we have in Shamrock everybody knew who he was
Yeah.
because he fought 3 UFCs
Yeah.
and I think it was
He had a
about to
draw
do the
with
super
Hoist.
fight with Hoist.
Yeah.
I don't know. He came in and
He
tried
came
to figure
in
out.
to try to get some
Yes.
special thing, and you guys just beat him up. And then I remember he even called Hoist afterwards.
Yeah,
And he
and
said,
what
"Hey,
happened
this
was
Ken guy
they
came."
come in with I don't know 10 reporters from Japan,
Yeah.
pictures everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. We looked at each other. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Just we're gonna do the best that we can today. And I mean, I wrestled Funak and John too. We just
You guys killed him.
and we went through over everyone. And I mean, he knew ground, but not as much as I think he thought he knew.
He thought he knew. Yes.
And when we grappled him, I think he realized, and other reporters, because we made sure that no picture taken would be good position for him.
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Every
That's
picture
right. Yeah.
we spoke in Portuguese, like, man,
You guys got
you
it.
can take any picture you want, but every picture.
But you made sure that the whole time you guys just dominated these guys. Yep. And I remember that. I was so impressed.
It was a fun experience in those times. We
Yeah.
have a lot of those almost like soft challenge,
Yes.
not like MMA, but it was like grapple challenge. A lot of people that came in.
Yeah. And there was like when I was a purple and a brown belt, people would want to challenge me because not only would I be easier, but I might be nicer if I win. And that was kind of their thinking behind it, right?
They were
It's
wrong.
like,
We're nicer than Chris.
yeah.
They miss. It's not what you see.
What about competing? I watched.
I
actually,
competed, yeah.
You competed pretty. I remember watching a lot.
He's
of
a world champion.
At black belt. I watched a lot of your
Yes.
stuff at black belt.
I competed more than most, not as much as some, right? And so I had a lot of. I was actually the first American black belt to win an official match. It was against, I can't remember his name.
I remember that.
Hickson was the ref. You raised my hand, and it was
because of Pan American.
Yes,
Joe Moreira.
it was and I remember thinking, because you got to understand, at that point in time, there's maybe 6 or 8 of us non-Brazilian black belts in
you
area.
were one of the first ones in America to become a black belt.
I'm in the first 12. I don't know what number I am, but at that point in time, our only vision and view of a black belt was Gracie's, Machados. And I would still feel like a blue belt against like JeanJacques or Hegan. So I got this match now against a Brazilian black belt. And I think I'm going to probably lose, but I'm going to give him the best fight I can. And Hickson walks out, and he's the ref, and he calls us over, and you could hear a pin drop because it was an American, right? And all the other matches stopped, and everyone crowded the mats, and it was those old days where everyone would crowd the mat.
We have like only 2 mats to fight.
Yeah.
This way, every fight had the full attention. Which I miss those days.
I miss those days
I
too.
think now I have 20 matches, then becomes something. And I understand so many people, you gotta have it, but back those days, like every fight was almost like a super fight.
Yes.
From the blue to the black belt.
And we watched it the way the Japanese
Everybody was
watch
very quiet.
with respect. It's not like now where like fans and white belts and blue belts are yelling at a black belt, get his arm, as if he doesn't know that, right? There was a respect about the fights.
I think everybody was not aware much of what it could happen.
Yep.
I think today so many people are more familiar with the arts.
Yep.
And that's why everybody thinks they know what they should say.
They do.
And again, they say because of they're hoping they want their friend or the person they like to win. But as you just said, the guy's a high belt. He knows what he's doing over there. And I think back those days was more like, oh, let's see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know.
It was, yes.
And everyone was unaware, like, it could be a sweep, an armbar, a choke.
It was
And
exciting.
always,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think was truly some of the greatest time. I think in terms of tournaments, everybody that had the chance to participate and be involved fighting those events, I had an amazing memory.
Yes, it was amazing times, and
And how was for you, Chris, being one of the roots at the beginning of Jiu-Jitsu, that what you have in mind in terms of, I see a lot of military people because of a background
Yep.
that was related so well to you. They have incredible compliments of how you're trying to bring the art for all purpose of the needs before
Yes.
war,
yes,
during a war,
Yep.
after war. How does that work for you too? Because it's almost like, it's not almost, you speak their language because you've been there, done that.
Yep.
And you know what is the feeling of being a war and live a war, and how the jiu-jitsu, in the way you see, will benefit all of them so well.
Well, I've never been in combat,
But
but
in
I
your
do
you have all these
understand the
people in your surround.
military language. Yes, and I understand more than most violence, and I understand more than most organized group violence, and how you relate the individual with jiu-jitsu philosophy to not only one-on-one street combat with weapons, with obstacles, with possible other opponents, but how you apply the philosophy to you
It's like you're speaking
working
their
within a
language.
team. Yes.
You speak their language because it's something that is every school end up having the instructors face a language, the character.
Yes.
In a way, I noticed that a lot of people that I spoke with, they related to you so well. Everyone that is involved in the military,
But
you develop also a way
Yep.
to innovating how you teach jiu-jitsu.
yes.
Not only for military, but for anyone who wants to jiu-jitsu.
yes.
How does that work on you? That your own personal experience, learning from the beginning of jiu-jitsu in America and the chance to live all these generations and develop on jiu-jitsu, how does that make you see the way you see jiu-jitsu today, especially when you're coaching and teaching people?
I kind of look at it like this as an analogy.
Uh-huh.
And analogies are just analogies. At a certain point, all analogies fail. But it's kind of like if you look at the Japanese original jiu-jitsu, which perhaps came from India, then was maybe lost and redeveloped. Then you have World War II happens. Japanese culture changes, and in Brazil, you guys take jiu-jitsu in this direction, the Japanese go in this direction. It's almost a speciation occurs. So if you have like the original ancestral wild cat, out of it you get a lion and a tiger, and a cheetah, and a puma. And they're all cats. They all relate, but one cat's a little different, right? And so the Brazilian, I used to say all the time, so while after the war, America and Japan and Europe were making the jiu-jitsu an Olympic sport, which is judo, adding rules, in Brazil, they were taking rules away. And there's the speciation, right? Boom. Now, within just a few years, you have almost two separate arts. Whereas judo is very regulated and rule oriented.
The rules made more sense to be a standout.
Yes.
And when you take the rules out in jiu-jitsu, it makes more sense
To be
to go to the ground.
to keep it on the ground.
Yes.
If you can't throw the guy and knock them out on the throw, then it's a grappling fight.
Exactly.
And but so then you come over to America, you introduce this Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Whereas in the American minds, we're still seeing the jiu-jitsu as a Japanese thing. And we're like, wow, this is different, and this is really cool. And then come the wrestling and the sambo, and little things are added which create an evolution. And so it even further speciates when, like back early MMA, they would come from a jiu-jitsu school or a wrestling school or a kickboxing school. Now there's like an MMA style. So it means there's less MMA guys involved in the jiu-jitsu school. So then it starts, and the IBJJF comes. Jean-Jacques was the head of Gracie back in Brazil, head coach, head champion, winning all these things. They kick you out about politics. You end up over here in the United States. Then the sport starts to evolve in these things where they keep adding rules the way judo did, right? Adding this rule, that rule, no heel hook, and this, and then these rules change. I remember when you fought in, I think it was the 98 or 99 pans. It was Jacare, I think, and you.
Jamelon.
Yeah, and the crowd booed when you had a split. And I'm like, but now no crowd would ever boo, right? Because that was the early adopting of the new stuff. And in that time, I remember, because I'm an observer, because I was a stutterer as a kid, I know how to observe all human interactions. And I watched Keegan go from a very flowing game and learning the pressure game. And that pressure game wasn't unique or even really there. It took the control of jiu-jitsu, the weight and balance of wrestling, the structural hold of judo, to kind of like meet to where Keegan really was like the guy who developed the pressure game and the pressure passing. Now, some people might be looking at this, throwing shit at the screen and say, no, man, this guy developed. No. Back in the early 90s, I watched, at least with Keegan for sure, who then spread it to us and others, and then that pressure game. And back in those early days, I remember Keegan could line up guys and tap them with just cross-sides pressure because they hadn't experienced that. And it was new, and I think it was new in Brazil too at that time. I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
I think when we learn jiu-jitsu, one huge advantage in terms of we have, because we don't learn jiu-jitsu, and actually we never learn jiu-jitsu with the intent to fight. We always learn jiu-jitsu with the intent to teach. We become great fighters, but the learning process of our jiu-jitsu is always teaching.
Yes.
We don't teach for a fight. No, we learn this to, that skill can teach better your student. And I think we always, growing up in a martial arts, always relate the jiu-jitsu to as a samurai. And if you think about what samurai actually is, it's a servant. And jiu-jitsu has the same mentality. We always learn to teach, become a better teacher, which consequently will become better fighters. If I can teach you to do a technique very well, that means I'm capable now to do that technique extremely well.
Yes.
And that's how my progress based on is make you do better, makes me be even better.
Yes, and through that philosophy is, I think, one of the reasons why I will say I got pretty good is because I had to teach too. And early on, Keegan would like call me up and he'd be able to come over and help me teach.
We always do that. Come and help me to teach, because I want the students, until today we do that, to get that feeling of pass on. Oh, I care about somebody else now. And everyone goes to that path. Every new guy that comes here, I have a blue belt, I have a purple belt, going through the same process. Or show him escape from the mount.
Yes. And if you can teach it, you know it. Then it's almost...
That was his class.
Yes.
Know how to teach someone.
The
students didn't realize that.
No. Yeah.
I'm sure now they're gonna hear that. It's like, oh, now I know why Jack always call me to show technique. Some days I don't want to do it, but I get so involved in I can do better technique now because I was able to teach.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is how the art grows. I often say, as an art, I like analogies. So you can look at the jiu-jitsu one as like ballet. You can't just walk in one day and be, I'm going to do ballet. You have to do pre-ballet. You have to stretch.
It's a process.
It's a process where you're learning an art that others have learned and they're handing it down. It's
In jiu-jitsu have those phases like you first learn how to learn.
yeah, yes.
Then once you learn how to learn, you learn how to teach.
Then yeah. It's very
It
very
goes,
true.
it's not like, oh, I'm teaching. No, I learn how to learn first because I don't know. Then when I understand and learn how to learn,
Yes.
I'm in a point that, I think I can show what I learned to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And then it's like, if you think of it in the belts, it's like you don't realize, like I didn't realize how good the black belts really were until I was like a purple belt, right? And where you're hitting that wall of like, how do I get past this fucking purple belt? I feel like I know everything now. I know how to mount, how to arm lock and all that stuff, but what am I missing, right? What part? And that's where that feeling comes where, like where you don't really remember this, but when I was either a brown or a black belt, you fixed my triangle and showed me how to do micro adjustments because I thought I knew it. And I was stuck. And then because I was stuck, I would say, oh, it's because my legs are short. Oh, it's because of this. I would have every other reason than the jiu-jitsu solution but to my problem, right? And then you showed me a couple tricks, and from then on, it's like, I have a triangle now.
Just don't show that to anybody out there.
No, that's
so
a
good.
secret.
But I think it's
That's a
through
secret.
this whole process, as someone who likes to teach, someone who wants to teach, evidently we trying to learn as much as possible. I know today I teach techniques that I do not use myself when I fight.
Me too. Me too.
But the process for me, and when you mentioned the belts ranking, is not the amount of techniques that the people know. Is how well they know how well they do the techniques they know.
Yes, yes.
I think it's the combinations they have in their games that's what makes the level move up. It's not how many techniques you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of us here would know 500 techniques.
We forget more.
Do we
than
use
you
500
yeah.
techniques? No, we might use 5, 6, 7 techniques, but we're gonna have to be exposed to those 500 techniques.
Yes.
To create our own combination into our jiu-jitsu game.
Yes.
And the students I have over here, and today is more obvious than to see, is sometimes a purple belt has a great combination in parts of the guard, which sometimes make harder than another higher belt that you train with.
Yep.
Their combination. And I think the ranking goes by how well they combine their techniques.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu because each one end up making their own combination.
Mm-hmm.
But for them to create their own combination, they need to have the sources. I want to expose them to every single possibility position that I know, and they will make the selection of what fits into their personality, into their athleticism, into their physique, into their mentality. That's why jiu-jitsu is non-stop evolution.
It's non-stop. And also, I think, and as a guy who boxed and coached boxing is a simple art. Jab, cross hook, slip, bob, weave, footwork, feint. You could learn everything in a weekend, but you spend the rest of your life mastering it. With jiu-jitsu, I will see some guy show a move, and I'll remember that I used to do that all the time. Why don't I do that anymore? Because there's so much knowledge. The breadth of it is so much larger.
That's the danger, because people get lost.
Yes, you can get lost. And it's like, remember in the early days, and I still occasionally have a guy who will think that once I learn it, then I know it, right? It's like, oh, can you show me that? Okay, now I know it. It's like, no, you don't know it. It's like anyone but could draw a face. I draw a circle, there's the eyes, there's the nose and the mouth. Does that mean you can really? No. It's like now you got to learn how to really draw a face, right?
Get the idea of.
Yeah, and
It's
it's
the
limitless.
timing on the mat. It's a training. Is evidently a good instruction.
Yeah.
I think you have to, evidently every school, you have to surround yourself with guys that do better than you. This way they bring your game always to the highest level.
Yep.
And always a learning process. It's really important. Chris, is in this whole process and journey that you have, do you see yourself today without Jiu-Jitsu? What Jiu-Jitsu did for you?
Let me put it this way. 2 weeks ago, I had meniscus arthroscopy because my knee over the last, I was lucky to where I went till I was 48 without any major injuries. And I remember like seeing the guys who had the bad knee injury, and it's like, oh man, that guy's fucked, right? You know, I had the sore back, the neck, your back's out for 2 weeks, you're walking, and my knee locked up, and it kept locking up, and it would click, and I built my entire guard career from purple belt to new black on A La Hiva guards, and that whole hook game, and the JeanJacques inside sweep game. Suddenly, now my knees are bad. It's like, fuck. So now I'm actually faced with looking at what is life going to be like without the part of jiu-jitsu that I loved so much. And, but I had an operation 2 weeks ago, but in the last like couple years, I had to pick a whole new style, right? And I couldn't hold proper posture anymore because of my knees. I had to have a whole low posture game.
You're relearning.
I'm relearning, yes.
Yes, and look,
just adapting.
Yeah. Everyone will go through that phase, regardless of injury or not.
Yes.
Sometimes you were able to train for 2 hours.
Yes.
Now we have to reduce to half an hour. How can I manage my game for half an hour?
I had an issue with my knee a while back. Like fluid built up.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know why. Like I didn't hit it. It didn't get trauma. But before they drain it, they said we gotta scan it to make sure there's nothing serious. So they give me the report on disc, and I read it, and it says natural deterioration. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, they drained it. It's been fine.
Yeah.
But I saw those 2 words, natural deterioration. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, well, you're over 50. That's just so. What I started doing, my knees are still okay, but I play like most of my game is butterfly hooks. I limit the amount of stress now. I feel like if I'm going to engage and I feel like, no, I'm going to feel this, I use it to frame, create space, and change tactics.
Yep, I got to change my entire game now. And I love top player. I'm a top player.
Look,
and I have been for the last
it's a circle.
10, 15
you go
years.
all the way to the top and suddenly go back like, man, this basic move now works so well.
Yeah.
It's almost like I go back and recycle myself again.
Because I was like one of the early guys who would invert back, and one of the first matches, me against a Clever in the Hickson thing, I would invert. And I remember afterwards, even the Brazilians were coming up and asking me, that inversion thing, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying I invented it. I didn't invent anything.
It's just part of how you play your jiu-jitsu.
But I was an early adopter of that game, of a game I learned early on, but from in my purple belt phase from Hegan and John, They said have an impassable guard. Once you feel so confident that people can't pass it, or the second when they pass you recover it, then you can have an attacking guard. Because now you're not worried about, oh, I got to be passed, I got to hold it. It's like, go ahead, try to pass, right? And that was like that evolution. That was like that early 90s through the early aughts, where the guard was just becoming this scientific laboratory, right?
And I think it's today we have so many more people training jiu-jitsu, practicing jiu-jitsu, competing with jiu-jitsu, and evidently there's a lot of different ramifications that this style has today.
Yes.
It's more rules in that tournament, less rules on that one, or let's take this out. It's basically jiu-jitsu overall, but you can see it diversifies. It's almost to create several different styles.
Yeah,
base
it is.
of jiu-jitsu today. That's what you see. You see a lot of phases of leg attack. Then suddenly a lot of phases of half guard. Then a lot of phases of open guard.
Yeah.
Then a lot of phases of passing like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the jiu-jitsu will always continue that trend of improving every kind of several tournaments. Something recycled and comes back in.
How did it feel to get your black belt?
Well, I will say this. The only belt that I felt like, yeah, that's mine, fuck you very much, was my brown belt. I'd been a purple belt for like 6 years at that time. And I'd gone through the purple belt blues where thinking I can't get any improvement. Then I would improve and I'd get better. And I'm doing really good. And it's like finally I get the brown belt. It's like, yes, I'm the brown belt. I felt like the day I had it, I was a brown belt. But every other belt, the blue belt and the black belt, when they first, I felt like an imposter, right? Like, fuck, I'm not really here yet. And I am grateful that within the first 3 months of having the black belt, I had that black belt match and won. Because then it's like, okay, I am a black belt. Because at the time, the only comparisons I had to holding the black belt was Gracie's and Machados. I mean, the icons, right?
That's case in point for my question, because today, like, you see people chasing the belt, chasing things, and it's like, you have to own up to that. You know, you're going to get that belt, you're going to need to represent it, and
we were told
it's different now, you know. But back then,
we were told in the early days, and I want to say it was either Horion that said this to me, maybe Carlos even. Not everybody gets but to be a black belt, even if they train all the time. And it's so you felt like, God, I might not ever get this. So it did make you dig deep, right? Whereas if you have it where, you know, don't worry, in 2 years, if you still suck, I'm going to promote you. Then it kind of waters it down, right? It becomes a time and grade thing.
Not in our school, right?
Not every school does that. But like, so the way I rank, okay?
Look how funny it is. You say about that. We get some, a few weeks ago, we have a lot of students got promoted because we have the COVID and delay a lot of things.
Yeah.
And some of the guys, man, how long have you been trained? And one of the guys like, man, I've been trained for, he got his black belt, 16 years.
Yeah, 16 years.
He was never in a hurry, and he was not ready. He wasn't trained as often as he should, but then he realized the moment he started being more committed to training, but it took him 16 years.
16 years. He didn't
quit. I don't know why people today like, how long? I feel like a lot of great fighters out there. They have great techniques to be a black belt. But it's not only that makes you a black belt.
Yes.
And I said that many times before. You give me a book, and the book you gave me has 20 chapters. It's like I read those first 2 chapters, like, I know now how to.
Yeah.
I can tell the story of the book. I might understand those first 2 chapters, they will be good enough, but it'll be hard for me now to teach that to somebody else.
Yeah, impossible.
You understand? And today is a lot of people that get their belts 4 years, 5 years, the great competitors, doesn't mean they're going to be able to teach somebody, because they never finish this whole process of being situations, be in the school and understand how to learn, how do I teach, how to learn. That's why a lot of times, not because the student today, his jiu-jitsu can submit the instructor.
Right.
Doesn't mean he teaches better than the instructor, and just show the fact that he's able to use his jiu-jitsu and submit the instructor. That tells me the instructor is a pretty good instructor.
That does, yes.
And I think that velocity that people want today, everything fast like the internet,
Yeah,
it makes you lose the best of jiu-jitsu.
it does. Because, and it's true, I've often said, the only people who say to not worry about your rank, your belt, are black belts, right? Because, I mean, part of when you're a lower belt, you can't not help but wonder, because it's a marker of growth. Mm-hmm. So if you're not progressing in there, you can either get mad and quit, or you can be forced to relearn, right? And I always say, like, now that I'm a salty old black belt, right? Each stripe is the time to forget everything you know and start all over again. Because, like, I'm supposed to be a 6th stripe right now, but I can't ask Hegan, right? Because you're not allowed to ask, right? I'm old school. You can never ask.
What was that again?
Maybe he'll watch this. I don't know. But
Higa, not allowed to ask.
6th stripe.
I like that, because I hear it all the time.
That's
so.
like in the olden days, you never ask for rank, right?
In our school, all the students know that. Some guys like, oh, I think I'm ready for blue belt. Man,
you give him another year.
I was thinking about to give a blue belt, but since you ask, next year.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, seriously, I was thinking about to give you this week, but since you asked now, another year.
Yeah, I was supposed to be 6th degree 6 months ago.
As soon as we finish, I'm going to call him.
No, you can't. Now he'll say,
I'll ask for him. He'll be fine.
He'll be like, oh, Jean-Jacques, just call me. But Chris, now you have to wait 3 more years. No, I think, the stripes after a black belt, I often say, man, that's just...
I'll be honest with you, I don't think I ever remember in Brazil getting stripe.
There were no... When I was new in this,
none of my belts had any bar.
Nobody had bars and stripes.
You see, like, man, that belt's so beat up. He must be there for quite some time. He's like an advanced blue belt.
I remember in Horion's backyard, seeing Hegan standing there, black belt hanging down to here, Hickson, black belt over the thing, Hoist, no red swap, no stripes. Yeah, that's none of the colored belts had stripes or any. That was all, yes.
And let me ask you this, Chris. It's something that I do with everyone that comes in. Who is Chris Haueter?
Oh boy, now we're getting into philosophy, which is my favorite topic of all.
You tell me, I'm curious to know. I know you, but I want to know how you know yourself. How do you see yourself?
This is the model in which, and I don't know how accurate it is, and it's just a model. But I believe that this model, who we are is this core. And we grow up, we have an orbiting awareness, loosely, of who we are, but can never really get to who we are. We just orbit. Then we become aware of being aware, and we got another orbiting layer. Then there are certain events in life and things where we realize that one of these layers is really not at all anything but chatter in our mind. That we're repeating things, that we really are just a mirror of others. Kind of like how they have those chambers where it's so soundproof and light-proof that most people can't handle a half an hour in there. Because when we can't interact with our world and sense, we start losing a lot of layers. And then whatever the inner core is of you, you start to become aware of. And in some ways it's humbling because you'll realize there's not much there without the reflecting of the other layers. So philosophically, who am I? I try to live my life as if I am from the far future and I'm transported back in time and I'm observing life as a historian or a journalist from the future.
And
so I don't personalize or emotionally attach to what is happening.
I'll fine. I will do that for you. Chris,
I didn't answer your question.
No, you did in a way, and the way you think, the way you see the evolution of mankind in a way, and on your case, evolution, the way you see things in life.
Can I have one more thing?
Please, yes.
So that's the mind part. Then you have the spirit and the body. And you cannot separate these, and the illusion is that you can. So my body has trained for 30-something years Jiu-Jitsu. So it has grown a part of me. So it's grown into my mind and in my spirit. And I think that we have who we are. Is there a core or not? I don't know.
But one thing I can say is, in the beginning of my brothers and myself journey outside Brazil in America, we end up meeting people. And I always tell that I don't believe the people that we end up meeting live was an accident. And I think the fact that you came along with Higan and became part of not only Higan, but all the brothers' life in a way, because I remember in the early days, things were very different than today. And you are one of the few guys that extend your arm. No, you guys can live in my parents' house. You know, they are for rent there. And you guys, you made an incredible deal. And you made it possible for us to achieve, especially in the hard beginning of our lives in America. You extend your hands. Not a lot of people know that, but made it possible for us to begin our journey in America. And I think, and I will never forget, very few people that we met along the way that were without anything in exchange, just the kindness that they saw some value on that art, they saw some value on the person that who we were. Nobody knew we were going to become what we become today. But in back those days, because who you are, your personality, you became part of the Machado family, right until the beginning, and until today, still putting out there the Jiu-Jitsu and made possible for us to that hard beginning, to have a place to stay, to have a house to live, to have a house that we're able to teach. I don't know if anyone ever told you that, but if it wasn't for that kindness that time, maybe we're not even going to be here today.
Well, thank you.
Okay. And Chris Haueter is all of this knowledge that he did from himself, I understand, but also from our view, somebody who has a great contribution to make sure Jiu-Jitsu never stopped, especially in the early days. And you guys should be very thankful for his early support to the Machado brothers and made it possible for all of us to have a podcast, to continue our Jiu-Jitsu life. And he knows that wasn't easy in those early days. And it was the students that we had, and you are one of them, that made it possible for us to be here. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Haueter.
you. And guys, go to the Combat Base YouTube channel. Don't just look at Combat Base or my name because it'll be on somebody else's channel. Go to Combat Base YouTube channel, click like, subscribe, and you'll never see it again. It just helps the algorithm.
And the thing too is all that information will
That's my page.
Oh, yeah.
provide
We'll put the link up.
We'll get
Yeah,
the
we'll
link.
put the
Oh,
link
cool.
up. We'll put the link up.
Because I forget that all the time, and my wife will be so mad.
No.
She'll say,
You'll be amazed. So all the information, Jay, we get it. Then,
our wives are tough.
oh,
My wife is third-degree black belt. Very
Man.
tough.
I learned that don't teach jiu-jitsu to your wife. But that's another story.
Thank
All right, everyone. Once again, thank you very much, Chris.
you, Jean-Jacques.
Man,
Thank
good to
you,
see
Jay.
you.
Thanks, Chris. Good to
See you
see
guys
you.
next time. No Give Required podcast.